it's billed as a workshop. My role at MetricStream, since I joined about 6 months ago, is conducting workshops with various... Have I lost you already?
Already. We're in the wrong place.
Oh, look at that. No worries. Okay, so conducting workshops with either existing or prospective clients to talk about best practices as it relates to basically anything but technology. So at MetricStream, we have a huge number of folks focused on technology, and I am not one of them. At my prior role at Fannie Mae, I was the GRC program lead, and I always tell people at the beginning of the 4-year journey that I was on there, I spent about 90% of my time looking at technology, the MetricStream technology. By the time I left, less than 10%. It was really all about the other pillars that we see here. And today we're going to, this is just sort of an intro into GRC, IRM, issue management. It's all sort of generic, but the way I think about it, governance, data, culture, change, and technology. Without all those five, we're really going to struggle to be successful. So issue management specific, well, these 5 pillars, for the time that we were most successful, and we did fail a few times, which is okay, was we failed when we designed any of these components sort of independently from each other without thinking about the other one. So if you design a standard for issue management without thinking about the technology, a couple things can happen. You're either going to have to change the technology and customize, which we're always told not to do, or go back and revisit the governance, which is a change management burden, which affects your culture. You may get different data, so on and so forth. So designing these things together is always something we want to think about. In addition, specifically for issue management, it's a prime play for success at an organization that has sort of multiple silos. So I think we've got the first, second, third line participants, and also regulators and external auditors. So this, in my experience, has been the collection of those who are using issue management. These people, these 5 groups are inputting data in some way, shape, or form into an issue management platform, and then we're extracting data and analytics for the same 5 groups. Just jump in. It's a small group, so... So I'm just going to run quickly through the 5 pillars, and then after each slide here, I've got just some pictures and things like that. But again, just want to get your perspectives. So, and I've got a picture on this one as well shortly to make it tie together. But for me, you've got your corporate governance. That should tie to your risk appetite, your regulatory obligations. Those are your constraints, and help drive the firm towards the corporate objectives. I mentioned data earlier as well, but if you design your standards with the data capture requirements, cultural considerations, as well as the change barrier or change burden in mind, you'll be more successful. So if you start to, if you give the policy and standard to a policy and standard professional, they will create a perfect policy and a perfect standard. When you start to shop that around with the first line, you need to be aware that compared to where you're starting from an issue management program, how much change is that first line person going to be expected to undertake? Examples, we first set out and we made the data collection in the form relatively burdensome, and then we had to spend a bunch of time and money training everybody in how to fill out the form, what each of the fields meant, and as a result, change suffered, adoption suffered, and things like that. So if you are, and we'll get to some examples of how to overcome that shortly, but you do need to be thinking about how ready for change the firm is, how much change is already going on. Certainly at my last firm, there was change everywhere. Digitization, we were moving buildings, changing logos, everything was going on. And then, like I mentioned already, if you create governance and technology together, or you choose your path together, much less likely need to customize either one or rebuild. So this is how my simple brain works. And this is a draft picture. But the way I think about it and the way I've used to explain to colleagues in the past, corporate objectives, every organization in the world has objectives. That's my friend. Every organization, well, a lot of organizations have constraints, so regulations or risk appetite. The rules you need to follow, you've got your policies and standards. What you do, what you execute in your pursuit of your objectives. You have your processes, your activities, that's the what and the how you do it. Then you've got your resources, so you've got human capital, third parties, physical assets. Those are the resources you use to execute your processes. And of course, you've then got risks. Your risks have controls or risk acceptances. And then, so sort of everything up there is somewhat on a bit of paper. But then down here, you've got issues, events, and incidents. These are the actual things that happen in the real world that eventually impede your ability to meet your corporate objectives. And the reason I wrote it in this way, and I've shared it with people, and people have said, why aren't your controls linked to your policies and standards? And they absolutely are. But in terms of how I explain to an executive why implementing an issue management program is important for their corporate objectives, this is the picture that has proved useful in the past. So let me stop, because I did want this to be interactive. Thoughts on this picture? Useful? Dumb? Anna? How do you guys think about issue management? So from my background, and it may be a transatlantic translation, but from my background, an issue is a gap, broken process, or a control failure, or a gap in a control. So it's something that needs to be remediated. Okay, got it. Okay, yeah. Yep. And for us, risk was future, possible, and then incident was an actual operational breakdown, but it may not rise. You may have 100 incidents that could be one issue because the theme is a broken control and so on and so forth. But yeah. Okay. So on the data side, some of the things to be thinking about when you are looking at your issue management data or risk data, whatever language you use. If you start with the end in mind, because again, everything here is all about change management. If you go to the board or senior leadership and literally draw some graphs and some charts with some numbers, even if it's dummy data, saying, does this help you execute your duty as a senior leader or a board member to assess the risk and control health of the firm? If you literally go to them and say, this is what I'm thinking of designing for you, building for you, and you either get yes or no or some variation of, you can then work backwards to design what data you need to collect. Again, oftentimes I've seen associates, mid-level managers design the data they're going to grab and collect, get all the way to the boardroom, and there's a question that they can't answer because they haven't got the data, they didn't collect the data at the time. So issue management is one of those apps that we have where there's the data capture is there's many bits of data you can capture, and you want to make sure that list of stuff is appropriate for your organization. Balancing that, it probably won't happen in the boardroom, but some individuals are 100%. I'm an 80-20 guy. I think you can get most of what you need, 80% of with 80% of the effort. Some people, some customers internally they want everything perfect every time. So just check for reasonableness on your data requirements. Don't boil the ocean. And maybe it's a journey that you're going to get to later, but I would always think about that. And then a key piece here, no technology or governance or culture is going to guarantee clean data inside your GRC issue management program. So you do need to be rigorous with your training and rigorous with your data integrity program to make sure the data is clean. So when it gets to the boardroom, no on-top adjustments, and you can have data at your fingertips all the way through. So this is a generic list of KPIs that we generated for a client because they were asking, well, how do you measure the effectiveness of GRC, your issue management program? The ones circled in red are some of the metrics or KPIs for issue management. So for example, I guess I could start, where are we? Let's say up here. So if you are either the head of the business unit or the chief audit exec, you might want to know, and again, if you've got all 5 of those groups participating in issue management, first line's putting issues in, second line's putting issues in, third line, regular. In theory, the amount of time, if your audit group looks at the data and the tech before they call you, when they're auditing you, if they look in the tool first and understand the issues before they come and speak to you, in theory, your number of hours, the interaction, and I've seen this work in a couple of places, your interaction time with the auditor should reduce. And that's something you can measure. The number of days from when the issue was reported to management being aware, again, something you can measure. Stuart had some really interesting stats on breaches earlier, but this is for all issues. If you want to measure your 3 lines of defense effectiveness, your risk culture, this one was always a hit for us. It was the number of issues identified by management as a proportion of the total number of issues. So in your organizations, where are you to within let's do quartiles. How many issues are raised by first line of defense? Do you think it's 1 in 4, 3 in 4, 2 out of every 4? Like how active and involved is your first line? I'm just going to stand here. Hardly any. Okay. So lower quartile. Yeah. Hardly any. Okay. Anyone? Any more? Any higher than hardly any? So there's a U.S.-based financial services organization that, the best I've seen, they had a 79% first line identification. They had built their metrics from customer. They built an iPhone app where people could log issues. The iPhone app also, if it was a high-rated issue, the head of that particular business unit, so somebody on the management committee, the management team, would be notified on their phone if there was a high-rated issue logged within their division. So if it was insurance or banking or credit cards. Obviously, it was a huge journey for them, but it can be done, and there's many different variants in between of where people land. But that's something you can measure. Your issue management program, it should help you get data to the boardroom much faster. Again, if you've got clean data integrity, you've got good first line participation, you've got people. They've got the information's on dashboard. It's transparent. People can look at it. There will be less on-tops. If there should be no on-tops, you should drive that to 0. Get people logging things in the tool faster and quicker and easier. And as a result of no on-tops and clean data, certainly in my experience when I was at Fannie Mae, we went down by, I would argue, from like maybe 3.5 months to about 1 month, 3 to 4 weeks between pulling the data set, pulling the snapshot, and getting it into the boardroom. Much, 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 much faster. So that's data. So some things to think about there. So culture. We've talked about data. So this one, the blend here between data and culture, the employees need to feel safe in order to raise their hand and get something logged. And I forget who it was on stage today, I've heard it somewhere, that the first line owns the risk. And if the first line owns the risk, obviously they're in the process that gives rise to that risk. They then, of course, know, I think it was Stuart, they know where the things are broken and what incidents are happening and those types of activities. So if you've got a culture that vilifies somebody who raises their hand and then they're not going to. If you've got a safe culture where people feel comfortable telling management when something's broken, or not with money, but other incentives, if they're incented to do so, that's also going to help drive data into the system. Now, you will get some junk, there's no doubt, but again, you've got a data integrity program here. And I think tomorrow, Vidya, observations in the keynote, you'll see Vidya who's got a solution for that. We've talked about the middle, and that's the amount from the first line. Yeah. And then, yeah, it sort of blends in with change. But if your culture, if your management team encourages change and doesn't penalize failing, then again, you've got some runway to go and make some of these changes to help you get the data in the system and to help you change the culture to be more risk aware. So this one, again, tomorrow, the graveyard shift tomorrow, I'm doing a whole session on change. This is one of my big passions, so I'll go quickly through it today. But my perspective, issue management especially, but GRC in general, is one of the most logical programs out there in business today. To break down silos and to unify how you categorize, how you standardize, how you rate a risk or an issue or anything else, put it in one place and get information out of it so you can make better decisions. That seems completely sensible to me. But it's, from a change perspective, it's really, really hard. Typically, GRC programs either originate from the very top of the house or from second or third line of defense. It isn't a shiny new object like many of the innovative products that are also change activities or moving buildings or whatever else. It's a necessary change, but it's hard because you have to disrupt the way people do their daily life, their daily jobs. Somebody's been rating a risk on a 1, 2, 3, 4 scale for 20 years, and you now say it's red, yellow, green, or it's quantifiable. It's tough. So different studies will tell you the vast majority of change programs fail to fully realize their benefits, and I bet it's probably higher with an integrated GRC. I think you'll get pockets of success, but to get the whole integrated soup to nuts GRC, very, very difficult. So plenty of tactics on how to do that. And again, I won't go into these today. This will be the focus of tomorrow's session. But through my, I'll just call them learnings as a practitioner, various training courses and other studies and literature, there are, whatever that is, 20 or so different tactics that when I go through them more fully tomorrow, if you are having change or adoption issues, you can literally take this with you on Wednesday or Thursday. You get back to the office, you can start building some of these things together. And I've got various other links and books that I'll happily share with you all. I'll just maybe pick out one or two. This first one, I think is pretty interesting. So activating informal networks. So we have an org chart, every company, of how the leadership thinks the organization should and does work. And then you've got the real version of that, of how it actually works. And again, I can talk more about this tomorrow. There's a cool firm that we used at my last place where there was a technology they had, a survey-based technology, where they actually asked people, effectively, who do you go to for help, or who do you go to if you've got a problem, or who do you go to for XYZ exercise? And they basically drew up a sort of a conflicting version of the org chart, and it isolates who is a change agent, who's on an island, who's not connected to anybody, and it gives massive insights on who you should or shouldn't target when trying to affect change. Most of those people are actually not in the executive ranks. It's intuitive, but not to the executive ranks. So most of the positive change agents are actually lower down in the organization. And some of the time, in my case that we did, about 800 people we surveyed, the senior leader in that group didn't actually know who these people were. Never heard of them, but these are massive positive change agents that were unknown in the organization. So what did he do? He tapped them for helping him drive his organizational change. Super, super powerful stuff. And again, if you've got limited resources, by focusing on those change agents, those natural change agents, he was more successful than had been before. I think it's not on here specifically, but a change review board, a change board of some description, make sure you get the first line of defense on that group. Bring them in early. You need their buy-in, because if you go build something and then deliver it and it doesn't work, then that's on you. If you bring them in day one, they can help you design how it's going to work for them, not how you think it'll work for them. So that's that one, which is, again, we'll go through more of this tomorrow. So think, and I know, again, I'm going to steal a little bit of Vidya's thunder here. I think I've touched on the platform play. Of course, if we're all using the same platform, the same standard, the same data quality, we're going to be in great position. I would posit that not everyone wants, I know that for sure, or needs to touch the main GRC tool. And again, I'll show you a few screen grabs here, but I think here, the vast majority of those first-line users should be contributing basic data. So something's broken, I think something might break, and I'm going to tell you about it, how I think about it in my natural jargon, risk-free language. And if you risk person think that's important, give me a call and I'll talk more about it. So the idea of that training-free GRC that lets, again, people participate in a different way. And if we think about where are we up to, Gen Z, I think now, where people are going to be on their phone all the time. It's always going to be a mobile device now. They can log things from their phone on the fly. It doesn't have to be in the office, et cetera, et cetera. So all these new things that Vidya's built, we'll see tomorrow. Other things, get your dashboards built. Again, as fast as you can. The sooner you can start to show value to the business and to the board, the better. You've got standard stuff like a Tableau, ClickView, those types of technologies you can build. It gives you a picture, gives you a trend. I have seen out there natural language processing in reverse. So imagine if you've got the input, it's gone into metric stream, it's been standardized, it's really clean data. You can now point a technology at the standardized data set which writes script for you and says the number of issues this month has gone up. This was mainly due to this factor, and so on and so forth. So it can now craft a narrative for you. So you don't have to spend time now looking at pictures anymore. You can go straight to words. And for a board member, that is, check it before you give it to them. But that's what they want to hear. They want to hear the narrative. Back to, I think, again, Stuart's point earlier, maybe not, maybe somebody else, but if a board member is just looking at a data sheet, there's no way of knowing that they are interpreting it in the appropriate way. You can now code that in using NLP. And then again, for issue management, and Vijay's going to talk about this, I hope, tomorrow, you can now scan the entire database of issues, whether they're open or closed, whether they came in through Asia or Africa or whatever it is. And it's a tool called semantic similarity. It's going to look now at your entire database and tell you if you've got a theme occurring that you hadn't spotted before. So let's say there was an issue with the cloud, and you had like the words cloud or AWS or Azure, whatever, and these issues were popping up all over the world. Maybe some have been remediated, some are reopened, and so on and so forth. This will now bubble up, or maybe they're all been rated low risk. This will now bubble up and say you've got 33 issues, 10 are open, 23 are closed, they're all low risk, do you want to look at it? There may be a medium or high risk when you aggregate those issues together. So the technology is now there to do that as well. And I really think that's an example of AI that whether it's not going to remove jobs, but it's going to improve jobs. It gets you better data really, really quickly, and you can then be a better risk manager as a result. So this is the M7 issue management form, or a version of it. Is this bit in production yet? The search, the semantic search? No. So this is something that's still in development, but the idea is, and it's a similar version to what I said before, you start typing the title of the issue and the description, you press search, and it will then look through your database and see if that issue's occurred before. This one's a time saver because if you choose to, you can accept the remediation plan of the prior issue. And it just populates and you go and remediate. While, of course, still thinking about the thematic element of it. And then this is the chatbot, which is when I mentioned jargon-free way to get issues and risks from the first line. This is imagine your corporate intranet site, compliance desk, or whatever you want to call it. Report an issue, report an incident. You then talk to the bot, it asks you questions, you tell it what you know in English, and then it sucks it in, sends it to a risk professional, and you're off to the races. Yeah, that's just the zoom in. So, last slide. This really, for me, is issue management in a nutshell. The value you can create using an appropriate issue management program. Data used by multiple parties. You can, and we haven't talked about this, but again, if you've got a policy where you are allowing those different parties to rely on issue and testing data, you can start to reduce costs through reliance. You've got oversight being executed with that improved experience, less friction, auditors spending less time with the business. You are looking at because you're tying your issues to controls. We haven't touched on this in detail. The idea is that you can start to think about whether you've got duplicate or redundant controls. I think Gaurav mentioned that earlier. Automated dashboards, faster time to market to the boardroom with data. Of course, the platform play allows you to reduce your technical debt. And if you've got training-free technology like those chatbots, all you've got to do is train the population to say, go to your intranet page if there's something wrong. That's it. There's no training cost or training burden to train people on standards and policies and metric stream and everything else. And then the idea, again, it's improve, not remove. You free up resources that can be deployed on insight delivery and analytics. That's the game. That's the ball game. So I know I whipped through that. I said, okay, 5:30. So any questions? I know it's been a long day. And I won't be offended if you just want to go, oh.
Is that a standalone metric stream application for issue management?
So I'm probably going to get this wrong. It's in everything. So it's in audit, it's in compliance, it's in ORM, it's in ERM. It's a theme throughout the platform. Is that a fair answer, Vidya?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's a part of multiple different apps.
So it's clever enough to link to the risks that are affected by that particular issue.
Yeah, so that's,
That's what it's talking about.
if you go all the way back to the first picture, this one. Yeah, so if you've got your issues, once you enter it, of course, your risk professional will then tag it to a control, and your controls are already tagged to your risks. And again, then you get to see all that data together. Yep. 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 This is how I think about the data inside the platform. And then this is how I think about the words when I'm not talking to you guys. This is when I'm talking to a non-risk person. But yes, but yeah. Does that answer? Okay. So on the app, right? If you the innovation button, you can log that as an idea. Stuart, there we go.
Peter, you mentioned one thing I thought I'd bring this up is you were talking about the change agent. I've had the pleasure to work with a gentleman who's on the transformation leaders panel tomorrow. And his title is transformational consultant. I think he's a great profile of what you were describing. So his name's Ken Simon. So if people want to talk to somebody who's, I think, of that profile you're talking about, he's fantastic with
Is that
change agent.
And is he M and G? Yeah. Yep. And talk about change. Didn't they go public, go private, delist, merge, go public again? Something. I mean, change on change on change. Yeah, I don't really know the story, but I think he's.
Real passionate.
That's a full-time job. Yeah. All right. Happy hour? All right. Thanks, guys.